The last fare on Ocean Drive. You know the gig economy, right? Driving rideshare is a lot like fishing. Some days you sit there for hours with nothing, and other days the sharks are biting. Meet Vinny. Vinny is a veteran wheelman in this city. I won't name it, but let's just say it's got casinos, a long boardwalk, and a lot of lost souls. Vinny knows the score. The daylight is for the tourists and families. But after 2 a.m., the city turns into a lonely, dangerous beast. It was a crazy Saturday night. The surge pricing was through the roof. By 9 p.m., Vinny had already hit his weekly quota. He decided to call it a night. He tapped Go Offline on his app. That's it, Vinny thought. Time to go home, crack a cold beer, and sleep. He was cruising down Ocean Drive, enjoying the silence. The sea breeze was rolling in, thick with salt and fog, making the streetlights look hazy. He was vibing to some jazz on the radio when he saw a figure standing on the shoulder, right under a flickering streetlight. The guy was waving his arms frantically. Vinny clicked his tongue. Nope, app is off. He ignored the guy and pressed the gas. But just as Vinny's sedan got close, the figure jumped right out into the middle of the road. Screech! Vinny slammed on the brakes. The tires smoked. His heart hammered against his ribs. The front bumper stopped just inches from the guy's knees. Vinny was furious. He slammed his hand on the steering wheel. You got a death wish, pal. He looked up. Standing in the headlights was an old man, gaunt, skeletal. He was wearing a filthy, oversized gray hoodie with the hood pulled up, hiding his face. He just stood there, head bowed, shivering in the wind. The man slowly shuffled around to the passenger side window. He leaned his head against the glass. Vinny rolled the window down an inch to yell at him, but before he could speak, a smell hit him. It was awful. Cheap bourbon, sour sweat, and the distinct heavy stench of mildew, like wet wool that's been rotting in seawater. The man spoke. His voice was raspy, like gravel grinding together. Need a lift, brother? Vinny wrinkled his nose and waved him off. No, app's off. Call another car. The man kept his head down, his voice pleading. Please, it's freezing out here. They took my ride. I need to get home. Vinny looked at the pathetic state of the guy. His anger cooled a bit. He had made good money that night. Maybe he could do one good deed. Where to? Vinny asked gruffly. The impound lot. No, take me to North Hill. Vinny shivered. North Hill? That was the edge of the city. Desolate. Nothing up there but scrap yards and the old city cemetery. That's the boonies, man, Vinny said, suspicious. It's a 20-minute drive. I want $50. Cash. The man suddenly snapped. He banged his fist on the door. Thud! You robbing me? The man shouted, his voice cracking. I'm a working man. I push a pedicab all day until my legs burn. And you want $50? He started rambling, angry and confused. Damn cops! They stole my bike and I was just sleeping. I'm cold. I just want to go home. Vinny lost his patience. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out of the car to handle this drunk face-to-face. Hey, old-timer! Vinny yelled, pointing a finger at the hooded figure. If you're drunk, go sleep it off on a bench. Don't stand here crying to me. I'll call the cops to haul you away. The man stood there, muttering curses. Cops, my bike, give me my bike. Vinny was about to step forward to shove him off the road when suddenly, tap. A heavy hand landed on Vinny's shoulder from behind. Vinny jumped out of his skin. He spun around. It was a sanitation worker, a big guy in a neon orange safety vest. His garbage truck was idling quietly nearby, and Vinny hadn't even noticed it. The sanitation worker looked at Vinny with tired eyes. Son, who are you yelling at in the middle of the night? You high on something? Vinny blinked. High? No, I'm arguing with that bum over there. He jumped in front of my car. Vinny turned back and pointed at his passenger door. See? He's right that... He froze. The street was empty. The passenger door was closed. The mist swirled on the asphalt. There was no old man, no hoodie, no smell of bourbon. Vinny stammered, pointing at nothing. But the old guy, nasty hoodie, smelled like a distillery. He said he was a pedicab driver, said the cops took his bike. The sanitation worker's face softened. He let out a long sigh and shook his head. "Let it go, son," the worker said quietly. "You just met old Gus." "Who?" Vinny asked, a cold sweat breaking out on his neck. The worker pointed to the streetlight where the man had been standing. There was a small, withered bunch of plastic flowers tied to the pole with wire. "Gus? He pushed a pedicab on the boardwalk for 30 years. Heavy drinker, but a harmless guy. Last winter we had a bad freeze. Gus got wasted and passed out in the back of his own pedicab right here." The worker shuddered. "He died of hypothermia, froze to death in his sleep. When the cops found him the next morning, they didn't even wake him up. They called a tow truck. They towed the pedicab, with his frozen body still in it, straight to the impound lot. Since he had no family, they buried him in the Potter's Field up on North Hill." The worker looked Vinny in the eye. "On nights like this, when the fog rolls in, Gus comes back. He thinks the cops stole his livelihood. He tries to flag down cars to get to the impound lot, or to his grave." Vinny stood there, paralyzed. His knees were shaking so hard he could barely stand. He remembered the smell of the damp clothes, the hooded face he never saw, and he realized he had almost agreed to drive a ghost to the cemetery. The sanitation worker patted Vinny's shoulder again. "Go home and listen. Next time you see someone waving you down on Ocean Drive after midnight, just keep driving." Vinny didn't say a word. He scrambled back into his car, locked the doors, and peeled out of there. He drove all the way home without looking in his rearview mirror once. To this day, Vinny still drives for a living, but he has one rule: no pickups on Ocean Drive after dark. And in his glove compartment, he keeps a small bottle of cheap whiskey. Every now and then, when he passes that streetlight, he rolls down the window and pours a little out onto the asphalt. "For you, Gus," he whispers, "drink up and stay warm." Bleeding from the eyes. Damn, listen to that rain. It's hammering against the roof just like it did that night, the night Billy died. Every time a storm rolls through Louisiana, I pour myself a glass of Jack, sit here in the dark, and wait. Wait for what? Maybe for the guilt to pass. Or maybe, just maybe, to see him standing in the corner again. My name is Kenny, and I'm going to tell you about the death of my little brother Billy. But this ain't just a story about a kid dying. It's about what happened after. About the blood that wouldn't stop flowing and the hunger that wouldn't die. See, Billy, he wasn't normal from the get-go. When he was born, back in a charity hospital outside New Orleans, he came out with a call. You know what that is? A call bearer. He was born with the amniotic sac still wrapped around his head like a helmet. Old folks down here in the bayou, they say kids like that. They got the sight. They see things we can't. They bridge the gap between the living and the dead. My Aunt Martha, a woman so religious she borders on insane, she took one look at baby Billy and started shaking. She was a Pentecostal, the kind that speaks in tongues and rolls on the floor. She pointed a bony finger at him and hissed, "That boy is marked. He's a changeling. You got to keep him safe, Frank. If he dies before he turns 18, God have mercy, he's going to drag this whole family to hell with him." Nobody listened. My dad, Big Frank, just cracked another beer and told her to shut the hell up. But there was one rule we all followed. Don't cut his hair. Specifically, that little rat tail at the back of his neck. Aunt Martha said it was the anchor keeping his soul tied to his body. Fast forward a few years. Our family was a train wreck. Big Frank was a long-haul trucker, a drunk, and a mean son of a bitch. He hated me. Why? Because I wasn't the daughter he wanted. I'm a trans man. To a narrow-minded redneck like him, I was an abomination. He treated me like trash, but Billy, he loved Billy in his own twisted way. Then came the stepmother, Charlene, a Waffle House waitress with too much eyeliner and a heart made of stone. Dad kicked Mom and me out to move Charlene in. We ran to Houston, Texas, just to survive. Billy was a good kid then, smart, quiet, but when he went back to Louisiana to live with Dad during the pandemic, he changed. The swamp, the booze, and that toxic house turned him into a stranger. When I tried to bring him back to Houston, he spat in my face, called me a freak, said he didn't want to live with a half-man like me. I left him there. I was angry. I told him to rot. I didn't know those would be the last words I'd ever say to him. A few months later, Dad kicked him out too. Typical. Billy ended up in Houston, working under the table at some cheap, greasy buffet joint, living in a motel with a cousin. I knew he was there, but I was stubborn. I thought, let him learn the hard way. God, I wish I hadn't been so proud. It happened during a tropical storm. The sky was pitch black, lightning tearing it apart. I was in the shower, washing off the grime of a double shift, when my girlfriend started pounding on the door. "Kenny, get out! It's Billy!" I ran out, dripping wet. The phone was screaming in my ear. My cousin was sobbing, hysterical. "Kenny, the breaker box, the metal wall. He got shocked, Kenny. He's fried. He's dead." Dead. Just like that. I drove to the hospital like a maniac, but it was a mess. Because it was a workplace accident involving a minor, the cops and the coroner were all over it. They demanded an autopsy. My mom was begging them, screaming, "Don't cut my baby open." But the law is the law. We sat there for hours, listening to the clock tick, knowing they were carving him up in the basement. By the time they released the body, it was 1 or 2 a.m. We had to shove him in a cheap casket and drive him back to Louisiana immediately. I sat in the back of that van, right next to the coffin, and that's when I felt it. A weight, a heavy, crushing weight on my shoulders, like someone was sitting on me, piggyback style. The air grew thick, smelling of ozone and wet earth. My head was spinning. I just knew he was hitching a ride. We got to Grandma's trailer at 3 a.m. We set the coffin in the living room. As soon as it touched the floor, the weight on my shoulders vanished. The lid had a glass window. Mom leaned in to kiss the glass, weeping. Suddenly, she gasped. "Blood! Oh God, look at his mouth!" I looked. A thin trickle of dark, dried blood was oozing from the corner of Billy's mouth. Mom wiped it away with a wet wipe, whispering apologies to him. Then, the front door slammed open. Big Frank walked in. He reeked of whiskey and diesel. He didn't look sad. He looked angry. He saw me and started screaming, blaming me for everything. "You killed him! You let him die!" He shoved past me and marched up to the coffin. He leaned over, putting his face right up to the glass to look at his dead son. And then, it happened. Cruentation. That's what they call it in the old books. When a corpse bleeds in the presence of its tormentor. As soon as Frank got close, fresh, bright red blood erupted from Billy's mouth. It bubbled up, filling the space between his lips and the glass. It gushed from his nose. Even his tear ducts started leaking bloody tears. It wasn't dead blood. It was flowing like a river. The whole room screamed. Aunt Martha started praying in tongues. Frank, the big, tough man, he turned pale as a sheet. He stumbled back, falling on his ass, scrambling away like a crab. "It wasn't me! Billy, stop it! It wasn't me!" Grandma rushed to the coffin. She put her hands on the glass, her voice trembling. "Billy, baby, stop! Grandma's here! Let it go, son! Don't hold on to the anger! Go to the light!" It took 10 minutes of praying before the blood stopped. The inside of the glass was smeared red, a horrific mask of death staring back at us. That night, I was too exhausted to be scared. I slept in our old room, or I tried to. In the middle of the night, I woke up paralyzed. I couldn't move. Standing in the doorway was Billy, but he didn't look dead. He looked like his old self, smoking a cigarette, smirking. He walked over to the bed. He looked down at me with those dark eyes. Then, he slapped me on the back. Hard. Whack, whack. I heard his voice, clear as day, echoing in my skull. "Hey, queer boy, you want to be a man so bad? You cut your hair, you bind your chest, but you couldn't even save your little brother. You ain't a man, you're nothing." I woke up screaming. My back was burning. I ran to the mirror. There, on my skin, were 2 red handprints, bruised deep into the flesh. The haunting didn't stop there. About a month later, the family gathered for a small memorial dinner at Grandma's trailer. Nothing fancy, just brisket, potato salad, and beer, trying to act normal. My Aunt Linda, the one who claims she can feel spirits, was sitting there, eating quietly. Suddenly, she dropped her fork. Clang. She started crying, silent, heavy tears rolling down her face, staring at nothing. Grandma leaned in, whispering, "Who is it? Who's there?" Linda couldn't speak. She just nodded frantically when Grandma said Billy's name. The spirit. Billy. He pointed a shaking finger at the crucifix on the wall. He covered his eyes and waved his hands, signaling that the light was too bright. He couldn't go there. He was stuck in the dark. Then, he rubbed his stomach. He pointed to his mouth, hungry. I remembered my dream. In the dream, he told me he wanted Popeye's chicken, spicy, the kind he used to eat before everything went to hell. Mom didn't hesitate. She grabbed her keys, drove to the nearest Popeye's, and came back with a fresh box, steaming hot. The smell of grease and spices filled the room. We didn't have an altar. We just cleared a space on the side table, set the box down next to his framed photo, and lit a white candle. We bowed our heads, invited him to eat, and stepped away to give him space. We waited until the candle burned down halfway, maybe 30 minutes. When Mom walked over to open that box, to maybe share the food or throw it out, the smell hit us. It wasn't fried chicken anymore. It smelled like rotting meat, like a raccoon that had been dead on the side of the road for a week in the summer heat. Mom gagged. I looked inside. The chicken pieces, which were golden and crispy half an hour ago, had turned black and slimy. Gray fluid was pooling at the bottom of the box. It was putrid. He had eaten. He had sucked the life out of that food and left us nothing but the rot. Since that day, things have quieted down. I think he finally moved on. Or maybe he's just full. I still hate my father. I'll never forgive him. But I learned something that night. The dead. They don't leave just because their hearts stop beating. They stick around for justice, or for a final meal. So tonight, when you turn off your lights, if you feel a sudden weight on your shoulders, or if you smell rotting meat in a clean room, don't look behind you. You might not like what you see. Good night, and try to stay alive. The night shift. This happened just 4 months ago. Natalie, a young hairstylist, had just visited her family in the countryside for a reunion. She was heading back to the city on a Greyhound bus. Before she left, her neighbor, Mrs. Foster, a deeply religious woman, had given her a blessed St. Christopher medal to wear for protection. Natalie had been seeing things lately, shadows in the corner of her eye, and the medal seemed to stop them. She felt safe, or so she thought. The bus ride was a nightmare. Halfway through the trip, Natalie started feeling a sharp stabbing pain in her abdomen. It wasn't just a stomach ache. It felt like something was twisting her insides. She spent 20 minutes in the tiny, cramped bus bathroom, sweating and doubling over, but nothing helped. When the bus pulled into a rest stop in a small town in West Virginia, Natalie collapsed. She couldn't walk. The bus driver called an ambulance, and she was rushed to the nearest medical facility. They just call it the county hospital. It was one of those old, nameless brick buildings sitting in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by fog. The lights flickered, the hallways smelled of bleach and old copper pipes, and the place felt abandoned even though it was open. Natalie was wheeled into the ER. She was vomiting, shaking violently and fading in and out of consciousness. The doctors diagnosed her with a ruptured appendix and severe internal bleeding. She needed emergency surgery, but the OR was full. She had to wait in a curtained-off bay in the ER. Her Aunt Martha and older brother Mike arrived shortly after. Aunt Martha was a devout Catholic, the kind of woman who kept a bottle of holy water in her purse. Natalie was lying on the gurney, groggy from pain meds, but still in agony. The painkillers took the edge off, but the pressure in her belly was unbearable. She drifted into a half-sleep. The sounds of the ER, the beeping monitors, the squeaking cartwheels faded into the background. Suddenly, she felt a presence. Through her blurry vision, she saw a figure standing by her bedside. It was a woman in a white coat, a doctor. She had long, dark hair hanging loose around her face, obscuring her features. Natalie whimpered, "Doctor, it hurts. My stomach." The doctor didn't say a word. She leaned over and placed both hands on Natalie's swollen, tender abdomen. At first, the touch was light, but then the doctor began to push. She dug her fingers deep into Natalie's stomach, right where the appendix was ruptured. "Ah, stop!" Natalie cried out. "It hurts! Please!" The doctor didn't stop. She pushed harder. Her fingers felt like icicles, unnaturally cold, pressing down with crushing weight, as if she were trying to reach inside and tear something out. Natalie screamed, "Aunt Martha, make her stop! She's hurting me!" Aunt Martha and Mike rushed in from the waiting area. "What is it, honey? What's wrong?" Aunt Martha asked, panicked. "The doctor," Natalie sobbed, pointing at the woman. "Tell her to stop pressing on my stomach." Aunt Martha looked around, confused. "What doctor? There's nobody here but us." Just then, a male doctor walked in. He saw the commotion and frowned. "Who was touching the patient? I gave strict orders not to palpate the abdomen anymore. It could burst." Natalie whispered, "The lady doctor. She was pressing it." The male doctor looked at Aunt Martha. "Ma'am, please don't touch her. We're prepping the OR now. Just let her rest." He left. Aunt Martha was shaken. She knew she hadn't touched Natalie. She gave Natalie her coat to hold and went to sit back down, but she kept a close watch. Natalie drifted off again. The exhaustion was pulling her under. But then, the pain returned, sharper, crueler. She opened her eyes. The female doctor was back. This time she wasn't just standing there. She was looming over the bed. Her white coat looked wrong, stained, old. She placed her hands on Natalie's stomach again, and she pushed, hard. Natalie gasped for air. She looked up at the doctor's face. The hair parted slightly, and Natalie saw nothing. Just a pale, featureless blur where a face should be. But she felt the malice, pure, cold hatred. Natalie tried to scream, but no sound came out. She was paralyzed. She looked to the foot of her bed. A nurse was walking by. The nurse stopped and looked directly at Natalie. She stared for a long, uncomfortable moment. Natalie pleaded with her eyes, "Help me!" But the nurse just turned and walked away, ignoring the torture happening right in front of her. The doctor leaned closer. Her voice was a raspy, guttural whisper that echoed inside Natalie's head. "You're in my bed. Get out. Get out before I cut you open myself." She dug her thumbs into Natalie's ribs. Natalie summoned every ounce of strength she had and let out a blood-curdling scream. "Aunt Martha!" Aunt Martha bolted into the room, and that's when Natalie saw it. As Aunt Martha crossed the threshold of the curtain, the doctor didn't walk away. She didn't turn around. She evaporated. 1 second she was there, crushing Natalie's stomach. The next, she dissolved into a gray mist and vanished into the air conditioning vent. Aunt Martha saw the terror in Natalie's eyes. She didn't ask questions. She pulled the hospital gown up to check Natalie's stomach. She gasped. Covering Natalie's abdomen were purple, bruise-like handprints, deep indentations of fingers that were far too long and thin to be human. Aunt Martha whipped out her phone and started playing an audio recording of the rosary. She grabbed her holy water and dabbed it on Natalie's forehead. "We need to move her," Aunt Martha told Mike. "Now." They demanded a transfer. They made a scene until the hospital agreed to send Natalie to a larger trauma center in the city by helicopter. Later, after the surgery was successful and Natalie was safe, Aunt Martha asked the nurses at that old hospital about the female doctor. The head nurse turned pale. "We don't have any female doctors on the night shift," she whispered. "But Back in the late 90s, there was a surgeon here, Dr. Vance. She went mad. She started experimenting on patients in the ER, pressing on their injuries to see how much pain they could take before passing out. She died of a drug overdose in this very room. Natalie survived, but she still has nightmares, and sometimes, when her stomach hurts, she checks the mirror, just to make sure there are no cold purple fingerprints coming back to finish the job. The blind spot on Route 9. My name is Ken, at least that's the name I chose for myself. Let's rewind a bit. Back to 2018. My life was a mess. My parents, they called it quits years ago, divorced, moved on. I stayed with my dad for a while in Texas, but when you're 16, going through puberty and realizing you're in the wrong body, well, let's just say a conservative household in the Bible Belt isn't exactly a safe haven. Seeing everyone else happy, living their normal lives with their normal families, it broke me. I felt hollow, alone. So I did what any desperate kid would do. I dropped out. I packed my beat-up Ford pickup truck, stole a little cash from my dad's stash. Sorry, Dad, if you're listening. And I hit the road. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to start over where nobody knew my name or my past. I ended up drifting north, landing in a small, forgotten town on the border of Oregon and Washington. Just trees, rain, and gray skies. It suited my mood. That's when I found Gable's Stop. It was a brand new diner and coffee spot, smack in the middle of nowhere on Route 9. You know those long stretches of highway where you don't see a gas station for 50 miles? That was it. I got hired on the spot. The owner, Mrs. Gable, was this sharp-looking woman in her 50s. Pearls, heavy makeup, always smelling like expensive perfume that barely masked the scent of desperation. She owned a chain of these places back in the city, successful, bustling spots. This was her new baby, her expansion project, she called it. She told me the government was planning to build a massive rest area and a park nearby in a few years. She wanted to be first. She wanted to stake her claim before the crowds came. Smart business, right? Or so I thought. The place was gorgeous, seriously. Neon signs buzzing in pink and blue, checkerboard floors, chrome stools, and a massive glass front looking out onto the highway. It should have been a gold mine. But here's the thing about Gable's Stop. It was a ghost town. And I don't mean slow business. I mean dead. I worked the opening shift, 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. Sometimes I'd cover the evenings too because we were so short-staffed. It was just me, an old security guard named Earl who spent 90% of his shift sleeping in the booth, and a waitress named Sarah who was always texting on her phone. We opened for months, and in all that time, I could count the number of customers on 2 hands. It was weird, man. It was eerie. We were right on the highway. I'd stand behind the counter, polishing the espresso machine, watching hundreds of cars zoom past. Semis, family sedans, motorcycles, they didn't even look. It was like we were invisible, like there was some kind of barrier, a blind spot that made everyone's eyes just slide right off the building. I remember one time, about 3 months in, it was pouring rain. A group of bikers, huge guys in leather cuts, stumbled through the front door. They looked shaken. I rushed over. "Welcome to Gable's. Coffee, towels?" The leader, a guy with a gray beard soaked in rainwater, looked around the empty diner with wide eyes. "Kid," he said, his voice rough, "we've been riding this route for 10 years. 10 damn years. I know every pothole, every tree stump on this road." He pointed a trembling finger at the floor. "I have never seen this building before. We only stopped because my bike's engine just died. Cut out completely right in front of your driveway. And suddenly, boom, here's this diner." His buddies were nodding, looking at the corners of the room like they expected something to jump out. "It's like it just popped into existence," one of them whispered. I laughed it off. "Well, we've been here a while. Maybe you guys were just driving too fast." But deep down, I felt a chill run down my spine, because they were right. It felt wrong. The air in the place felt heavy, static, like the moment before a thunderstorm that never breaks. And that was just the beginning. Mrs. Gable was losing her mind. She wasn't just a shark in a blazer. She was deeply superstitious, obsessed with cleansing the energy. She became convinced that the land was angry or that the feng shui was off. So she started making me do this weird ritual. Every single evening, right before sunset, she demanded I leave a peace offering on the desk in the back office. A plate of fresh pastries, a glass of pure milk. She said it was to appease the guardians of the land so they wouldn't take from us. I did it. I needed the paycheck. But here's where the nightmare starts creeping in. In the old location, the main branch in the city where I trained for a week, the food stayed fresh. Normal, right? But at Gable's stop, I would set the table at 5 p.m. Freshly baked bread, steaming hot oatmeal, a glass of cold milk. By 5:30 p.m., 30 minutes later, the food was rotting. I'm not talking about getting cold. I'm talking about decay. One evening, I went back to clear the table. I picked up the bowl of oatmeal. It had turned into this gray sludge-like liquid. It smelled like bile. The bread? It was covered, completely covered, in thick green fuzz, mold, in 30 minutes. And the milk, God, the milk. It had curdled into chunks, yellow in separation, smelling like something had died in it. I gagged. I almost threw up right there on the office carpet. "Mrs. Gable," I called out once. "The fridge must be broken. The AC is out. Something is wrong with the air in here." She looked at the rotting food, and I saw real fear in her eyes. Not anger. Fear, but she masked it quickly. "Just clean it up, Ken," she snapped. "Probably just the humidity from the rain. Don't be dramatic." Dramatic? I took a loaf of bread from the pantry, a sealed plastic bag, expiration date 2 weeks from now. I opened it. Green dust puffed out. The entire loaf was a brick of mold. That night, I asked Earl, the security guard, "Earl, does this place feel off to you?" Earl took a sip of his flask, stared out at the dark, empty parking lot, and said something I'll never forget. "This land didn't want a building on it, son. Before Mrs. Gable bought it, there was an old seafood shack here, burned down. Before that, a house, collapsed. The soil here, it's sour. It eats things." He paused, looking at me with cloudy eyes. "And that contractor, the one Mrs. Gable stiffed, I heard him talking before he left the job site. He wasn't yelling, he was laughing. He said he planted a seed in the foundation, a seed that grows hunger." I didn't know what that meant. A seed that grows hunger? But I was about to find out. The hunger started in the restroom. The employee restroom was down a long, narrow hallway in the back, separate from the customers. It was just me, Sarah, and Earl on shift. One night, around 8 p.m., I had to use the bathroom. I walked in. It was freezing cold. I mean, see your breath cold. We didn't have AC in the back, so it made no sense. I went into the stall, did my business. It was dead silent. Then, from the stall, right next to me, thump, thump. Someone sat down. I froze. Sarah was at the counter. Earl was outside smoking. Who the hell was in the stall next to me? Then I heard the toilet paper roll. Screech, screech. You know that sound when someone pulls the paper aggressively? It was loud, violent almost. "Hello?" I called out. "Is someone there?" Silence. Then, screech, screech again. My heart was hammering in my chest. I slowly, very slowly, lowered my head to look under the partition. I looked under the gap. Nothing. There were no feet, no shoes, just the cold white tile floor. But the sound continued right above me. Screech. I pulled my pants up so fast I almost tripped. I kicked the stall door open and banged on the door next to me. It swung open, empty. But the toilet paper, it was unrolled. A long white stream of paper lay piled on the wet floor, soaking up the dirty water, and the roll was still spinning. Wobble, wobble, wobble. Stopping right in front of my eyes. I ran. I ran so fast I slipped in the hallway and bruised my elbow. I burst into the main dining area, panting. "Ken, you look like you've seen a ghost," Sarah laughed, not looking up from her phone. "Who's in the back?" I yelled. "Who's in the bathroom?" "Nobody, dude. Just you. I've been sitting here for an hour." I checked the security monitor behind the counter. The hallway camera showed me running out. But before that, for the 10 minutes I was inside, no one entered, no one left. But I knew what I heard, and I knew what I didn't see. That was the night I realized we weren't alone in Gable's stop. Or maybe we were the intruders, and the real tenants were starting to get angry. But the worst part, the thing that actually made me quit, that happened a week later, and it involves the dry storage room and the children who weren't really children. So the rotting food, that was gross. The bathroom ghost, I was terrified. But what happened in the dry storage room, that broke me. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a haunted house. This was a trap. It was about a week before I quit. I remember it was a Tuesday, because Tuesdays were always the slowest days, if you can believe slower than 0 is possible. I wasn't feeling well. I had this fever creeping up on me, you know? My head felt like it was stuffed with cotton. My joints ached. But in the service industry, you don't call in sick unless you're dead. You pop 2 Tylenol, chug an espresso, and push through. Around noon, the dizziness got bad. I almost dropped a tray of clean glasses. "Hey, Sarah," I said, leaning against the counter. "I'm gonna crash in the back for 20 minutes. Cover for me? Not like we have a rush coming in?" Sarah rolled her eyes but nodded. "Go ahead. Don't die on me." I stumbled into the dry storage room. It's where we kept the bulk supplies, 50-pound bags of flour, sugar, boxes of syrup, paper cups. It was quiet in there, smelling like cardboard and coffee beans. I found a stack of empty aprons, made a little pillow on top of some flour sacks in the corner, and passed out. I was out like a light. Then, the dream started. In the dream, I was still in the storage room. Same dim lighting, same smell of cardboard. I was lying on the floor, paralyzed. The door to the storage room creaked open. I expected Sarah, or maybe Mrs. Gable, coming to yell at me for sleeping on the clock. But it wasn't them. 4 kids walked in. They were small, maybe 6 or 7 years old. 2 boys, 2 girls. They weren't dressed like normal kids. No bright colors, no cartoons on their shirts. They were wearing these old, oversized hoodies, gray, brown, faded black. The hoods were pulled up, casting shadows over their faces. They walked wrong. They didn't bounce like kids. They shuffled. Unison steps, scuff, scuff, scuff. They surrounded me. They stood over me, looking down. "Hey, Kenny," one of the boys whispered. His voice didn't sound like a child. It sounded like static on a radio. "Hey, Kenny, come play." I tried to speak. I tried to say, "Who are you? Get out." But my mouth was sewn shut. The girl on my left leaned in closer. She giggled. But it wasn't a happy giggle. It was wet, guttural. "It's fun in here," she said. "It's fun inside the walls. Come inside." Then, they all pulled back their hoods. I swear to God, I stopped breathing. Their skin was pale, like sheet of paper pale. But their eyes, they were black. Pure, solid black. No whites, no iris, no pupil. Just 2 obsidian pools of darkness staring right into my soul. It looked like someone had poured ink into their eye sockets. They were shark eyes, dead, hungry. "Play with us," they shrieked in unison. Suddenly they lunged. 4 pairs of small hands grabbed my arms and legs. Their touch, it burned. It was freezing cold, like dry ice, burning my skin through my jeans and shirt. They started dragging me. And they weren't dragging me toward the door. They were dragging me toward the back wall. The solid concrete wall that separated the kitchen from the woods outside. "Into the wall! Into the foundation!" they chanted. I was thrashing, screaming in my head, fighting with everything I had. But they were impossibly strong. It felt like hydraulic presses were clamping down on my limbs. And then the sound started. Above us, on the roof. Boom, 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 boom. It sounded like a giant was running back and forth on the metal roof, or like someone was dropping a sledgehammer directly onto the ceiling tiles. Boom, boom, boom. The dust from the ceiling was falling into my eyes. The kids were laughing, dragging me closer and closer to the concrete wall. I could see the wall rippling like liquid, ready to swallow me whole. "You belong to the builder now," the boys screamed. "No," I screamed, for real this time. I ripped myself out of the dream. I sat up, gasping for air, clutching my chest. My heart was going 1,000,000 miles an hour. I was drenched in sweat. I looked around frantically. The kids were gone. But then, I realized something. When I laid down, I was in the corner, curled up on the flour sacks against the east wall. I was now lying in the dead center of the room. I was 10 feet away from where I fell asleep, and the sound, the boom, boom, boom on the roof, it was still happening. Boom, 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 heavy, rhythmic, shaking the shelves. Cans of peaches were rattling against each other, clink, 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 and under that noise, faintly, I heard it. The giggling. It was coming from inside the walls. Panic took over, pure animalistic panic. I scrambled to my feet, slipping on the smooth concrete, and threw myself at the door. I grabbed the handle and twisted. It wouldn't budge. "Open! Open!" I screamed, slamming my shoulder against it. The door wasn't locked. There was no lock on the inside of the storage room. It was just a push handle, but it felt like someone was holding it shut from the other side, or like it had been welded to the frame. Boom! 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 The footsteps on the roof were getting louder, directly above my head now. "Sarah!" I screamed. "Sarah, open the door! Help me!" I was crying. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I was a grown man, crying and banging on a metal door while unseen children laughed at me from the drywall. "Sarah, please!" I reached for my phone in my pocket to call 911, my hands shaking so bad I dropped it. Suddenly, click. The handle turned easily in my hand. The door swung open. I fell out into the hallway, landing on my hands and knees, gasping, snot running down my face. Sarah was standing there, holding a mop. She looked down at me, totally confused. "Ken?" she asked. "What the hell are you doing? You okay?" I scrambled up, grabbing her shoulders. "Did you hear them? Did you hear the roof? Why didn't you open the door? I was screaming for 5 minutes." Sarah pulled away, looking at me like I was on meth. "Ken, chill out," she said slowly. "I've been standing right here at the sink, filling this mop bucket. The door wasn't locked, and nobody was screaming." "What?" I wheezed. "The roof! The banging!" "There was no banging, Ken," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It's dead silent. The only thing I heard..." She paused, looking toward the storage room I just escaped from. "Was you talking in your sleep? You kept whispering, 'Don't put me in the wall, don't put me in the wall.'" I froze. I looked back into the storage room. It was empty, just stacks of boxes and dust. But on the floor, in the dust, right where I had woken up in the middle of the room, there were drag marks. 2 long streaks in the dust, like heels being pulled across the floor. And next to them, small, bare footprints, child-sized. I grabbed my bag. "I'm leaving," I told Sarah. "I'm done. I quit." "You can't just leave mid-shift," she yelled. "Watch me," I said. "And if you're smart, you'll get out too." I ran to my truck. I didn't even clock out. I just drove. I drove until I was 3 towns over. I thought I was safe. I thought leaving the building meant leaving the horror behind. But Mrs. Gable, she wasn't so lucky. And I was about to find out the truth about why the place was cursed. It wasn't just ghosts. It was a debt paid in blood. I never went back to Gable's stop. Not for my last paycheck, not for my apron. I blocked Mrs. Gable's number. I just vanished. But you know how small towns are? Secrets don't stay buried. They rot, they bloat, and eventually, they float to the surface. About a month after I walked out, I ran into Sarah. I was at a dive bar in the next town over, trying to drown the memory of those black eyes with cheap beer. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, shaking hands. She looked 10 years older. She sat down next to me and didn't even say hello. She just whispered, "You were right, Ken. You were right about everything." She told me what happened after I left. Apparently things went from bad to hell in a handbasket. The rotting food started happening every hour. The toilets would flush by themselves in unison 20 times a day, and the customers, still zero. The blind spot was getting stronger. Sarah said she watched a car crash right in front of the diner. The driver swerved to avoid a deer, and when the police came, they didn't even see the diner standing 10 feet away. They parked their cruisers on the shoulder, took statements, and left, treating the brightly lit building like it was just a patch of forest. Mrs. Gable finally cracked. One night, drunk on wine and fear, she broke down crying in the kitchen while Sarah was mopping. She spilled the beans. She told Sarah about the contractor. His name was Miller. He wasn't just a regular construction guy. He was a local. Lived up in the mountains, off the grid. The kind of guy who knew which roots could heal you and which ones could kill you. Mrs. Gable, being the greedy shark she was, had tried to cut corners. She found a loophole in the contract and refused to pay him the last $50,000 of the job. She thought she was smart. She thought she could bully a hillbilly carpenter. On his last day, Miller didn't scream. He didn't sue. He just smiled, a wide, toothless smile. He told her, "You want to keep this building? Fine, it's yours. But a house built on stolen money needs to pay rent. If the living won't pay, the dead will." He confessed to Mrs. Gable that before he poured the concrete for the main support pillar, the one right in the center of the dining room, he had dropped something into the wet mix. A witch bottle. It's an old folk magic thing. A jar filled with rusty nails, urine, broken glass, and something else. He said he bound the foundation to the shadow side. He cursed the land so that the living would instinctively look away, a perception filter. To normal people, the diner was just a blur in their peripheral vision. But to things that aren't alive, to the hungry spirits wandering the highway, to those black-eyed kids, the diner was a beacon. It was a lighthouse. That explained everything. The rotting food. That's what happens when death energy is too high. The cold spots, the voices. We were serving a clientele that didn't pay with cash. After hearing that, Sarah quit that same night. Mrs. Gable tried to hold on. She tried to sell the place, but obviously, no real estate agent could even find the listing. 2 weeks later, the authorities found her. She was found sitting in the middle of the dining room floor at 3:00 a.m. The lights were off, the doors were unlocked. She was sitting at a table, setting places for 4 people. 4 empty chairs. She was laughing hysterically, talking to the empty chairs. "More milk?" "Yes, of course, please eat. Don't take my legs, just eat the bread." They institutionalized her. Last I heard, she's in a facility in Portland, staring at the walls, screaming whenever someone turns off the lights. As for Gable's stop, it's still there. Route 9, mile marker 42. It's abandoned now. The neon signs are smashed. The windows are boarded up with plywood. Nature is reclaiming it fast. Vines choking the walls, moss eating the roof. Most people drive past it at 70 miles per hour and don't even register it's there. To them, it's just a patch of trees. But I drive a truck now, long haul. And sometimes my route takes me down Route 9. I try not to look. God, I try. But last week I was passing by at around midnight. The moon was full. I glanced over. The building was dark, ruined. But in the front window, where the glass used to be, I saw a silhouette, small, wearing a hoodie. It raised a pale hand and waved at me. And for a split second, my headlights caught its face. It was smiling, and its eyes were 2 black holes sucking in the moonlight. So here's my advice to you. If you're ever driving through the Pacific Northwest, and you see a diner that looks a little too retro, a little too quiet, and your GPS doesn't show it on the map, don't stop. Don't get coffee. Don't use the bathroom. Just keep driving. Keep your eyes on the road. Because if you stop, you might realize that you're the only living thing on the menu. Good night, everyone, and check your walls.